and welcome to our podcast, Moon and Sagi.
I'm Bedir, aka Moon,
I'm Ryan, aka Sagi.
and this is a conversation about Britney Spears' ex-fiancé and former co-conservator of her person, Jason Trawick, recently defending the conservatorship on a podcast. Andrew Tate being detained for human trafficking and the potential outcome of his case, and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's Netflix documentary and Harry's book.
So recently, Jason Trawick, is that how you say his name? I'm never quite sure.
Yeah, I think so. That's how I say his name.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's really not even important, anyways. But Jason Trawick, who was Britney's former fiance, and also he was Britney's co-conservator for a hot minute. Um, a lot of the press is reporting on him as just like Britney's former fiance. I think it's really important to point out that he was officially a co-conservator because he was conservator of her person. Um, anyway, that's all a big lead up just to say that Jason Trawick has been he was on a podcast recently,
Yep.
kind of like defending James Spears, and I didn't watch it because I just like I can't do that stuff, but you watched it, or at least parts of it, right?
Yeah, I listened to the part where Jason Trawick talked about Britney. Basically, he was blatantly saying that she needed the conservatorship, and it seems like the podcaster is under this common impression that conservatorships are largely just about financial support or like financial counseling. So he was like, well, he was basically objecting to what Jason was saying, telling him that people can get help with their money without being in a conservatorship. So Jason,
Good, good.
yeah, that's definitely a good thing. But Jason then kept trying to reinforce his point, and he was like, no, it's not just the money. She needed help with choosing the type of people that get in her life, help with the kids, and things like that. So he was, basically that reflects the role he had as conservator of her person.
Yuck.
Yeah.
Okay, so wow, so basically Jason was just like repeating basically what Team Khan has always said is the whole reason why there had to be a conservatorship, like all the same talking points.
Yeah, definitely. And he tried to like absolve himself a little by saying, I don't know if it should have ended sooner, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, honestly, his this rhetoric he's spreading sounds exactly like what Rosengart has on paper. And we're not going to get into the court case, but it definitely reflects the same sentiment of Brittany needing the conservatorship in the beginning, but then she got better.
Right.
And I think that's really harmful for disability justice because conservatorships are inherently abusive by design. And in Brittany's case, I don't think it helps with her situation with Jamie. So it just seems like there's a lot of people partaking in the smear campaign that's happening right now. And Jason Trawick is no exception.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, this narrative of like it the conservatorship was necessary in the beginning, and then at a certain point, like it wasn't needed or okay anymore. At a certain point, it turned abusive. I really reject that, and just beyond the point of conservatorships being inherently abusive, it's just kind of this odd thing of like, okay, so when didn't Brittany need your help? When did it go too far? Because it kind of seems that a lot of people feel it went too far when Brittany got thrown in that facility in 2019. But it's just like we saw so much stuff beforehand that it was definitely abusive before. So yeah, it's just the whole thing shouldn't have happened. And if the conservatorship genuinely, quote unquote, should have happened, again, like I reject conservatorships entirely. But like, okay, fine, like it should have happened. Then why did they have to go about it in such an illegal means? And it is really disappointing to see Rosengart reinforce this narrative by it's in official court docs, like as part of the conservatorship ending, was, this concession of, oh, okay, yeah, it needed to happen at one point, but it's no longer necessary. Sadly, that is what Britney's attorney has agreed to. So as much as it's annoying and like infuriating that Jason Trawick is going around talking about these things, especially when he was a part of it, sadly, Britney's attorney agrees with him on a lot of these points.
Yeah, and even if it's part of a strategy, even if that's not what he truly believes, it doesn't matter. That's what's on paper right
Right.
now, and Jason Trawick is basically repeating that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what Jason Trawick's intentions are or the motive.
Yeah.
Could be that he's trying to absolve himself. Maybe he's worried something is coming towards him since he was co-conservator. Maybe he was paid to partake in this campaign. Maybe Daphne Barak and Jamie are behind this. Kevin, I don't know. Either way, it's trash.
Should we talk about Andrew Tate? I mean, I don't wanna, but should we?
Yeah, yeah, let's do it.
It's kind of important. Yeah, okay. So Andrew Tate, who I had never heard of this guy until like what happened to him right before New Year's Eve. And you hadn't heard of him either.
Yeah, no, I've never known of him at all.
Yeah. No, yeah. So for those who don't know, which was us until just recently, Andrew Tate's just this like influencer, I guess, who's online, and he's just trash and he's really toxic. He engages in a lot of toxic masculinity and like misogyny, and he's awful. And it's been widely reported and honestly widely known for a while that he's also a human trafficker. And basically that caught up to him on right before New Year's Eve. So on December 29th, he got detained by authorities in Romania for, suspicion of being attached to human trafficking. And it's been it was found out that the whole reason that the authorities were able to find him and prove that he was in Romania because he did a really pathetic clapback at Greta Thunberg, after he had kind of baited and engaged with her online on Twitter about just it's so ridiculous. Am I
Yeah,
missing a part?
yeah, it's so silly.
It's really silly, but is that kind of what happened then?
Yeah, basically, he was trolling her in a sense.
Yeah, he was trolling her about how many cars he had and how they like
Hmm.
leave enormous emissions, which oh my god, I can't with that. But and so then Greta Thunberg was like, okay, like yeah, why don't you email me at like smalldickenergy at getalife.com or whatever she said. It was something along those lines.
Right.
And then he sent a video back at her, and in the video there was a pizza box that he got, which he pointed out was not a recycled pizza box. So he like brought attention to this pizza box. Um, and I guess the pizza box was like a Romanian pizza chain, and that
Yeah,
was kind
it's
of
a local
all it
brand.
took.
Yep.
Yeah, that was all it took for the authorities to really prove that he was there. Um, I'm kind of unclear about. Well, I'll pause for a moment on that. But so I guess he wasn't arrested, which is what I was under the impression of at first. I guess technically he's just been detained. He was detained on the 29th of December, and he's supposed to be detained for the next 30 days. And basically, I've nothing's really been determined yet. I've heard though that his lawyers have said things that like his online character, that's what they're calling his persona, his essence, what he does online. They're calling it a character, and they're saying it can't be used against him. So, what do you think?
I think it's ridiculous, but I think they might have a good legal point. I think that is something they can argue, I feel.
Unfortunately, yeah, I'm a little worried about that too because it just means that people can get away with saying really violent, really
Mm-hmm.
like inciting danger and violence, not only just to women, but like just in
Yeah.
general. If we're going to excuse this kind of violence as a character, um yeah, what does that mean legally? It freaks me out.
It's gonna set a precedent for sure.
Right. And I don't know if this is going to be determined in Romanian courts. I know he's being detained by Romanian authorities right now. But he is a dual citizen of the UK and the United States.
I was just gonna ask, is he British? But yeah, I guess he's a dual citizen.
He's dual, yeah, he's UK US.
Who was he originally wanted from? Which government? Just Romania?
I think just Romania, because that's the
Hmm.
thing. When he was quote unquote investigated with the United States and with the UK, they dismissed it. I know the cops in the UK, they had evidence of him saying things like he loves R wording his, that he sent this to the women that he had, coerced. He loves R wording them. And the cops said that there was an ounce of doubt about him being guilty of assault. He's literally saying he loves doing it. And then there's this debate of,
How? How did it become a debate?
well, basically, I mean, besides cops being trash and assaulters themselves, um, I think a lot of it comes from, I think they argue it being, oh, this is maybe a fetish. Oh, maybe this is how, just like kinky talk with each other. This isn't actually admitting a crime.
Um, Role playing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, this is part of the problem. I mean, with this idea that role playing this type of stuff is a kink, that it is like a good thing in any way, that it's a healing thing, it's a reclaiming thing. I just reject all of that, because at the end of the day, you're still like setting up a dynamic of full on assault. And it's just, it's gross. And it leads to debates like this.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just like an indulgence of the same power dynamics that take place in a real R word situation.
Mm-hmm.
And just because it's a, quote unquote fantasy doesn't mean that it's not harmful engaging in it, I feel, because like you said, it does lead to something like this where like blatant admission is dismissed as, sexting.
Right. And I just, it's also like, do you really want to engage with intimacy with someone who can be aroused at this idea, at this concept? Like, I don't know how the blurring of like, this is a fantasy versus reality. I don't, I don't think there is a line. I think it's just gross. I don't like any of it. But and this is part of the problem too, is that he was part of his human trafficking that he was doing. It's in a way that a lot of people don't think of like coercing people through relationships, like people, like he would use the lover boy technique of like making people fall in love with him and like just want to do things for him. So a lot of people don't think of this as another way of human trafficking, but that's what was going on. And he was forcing a lot of these women to be videotaped and then was uploading it to like porn sites. And this just leads to a whole other area of how we, with the way porn is not regulated, really, there's really no way to tell if what you're viewing is consensual or not, unless you're like directly paying someone who, and even then you might not know. It's just,
Yeah.
that's a bigger conversation that I think honestly we could do an entire episode on, and I don't even know quite if I'm could get into that fully, because it's such a intense subject, but it's, this is the reality of the industry. And it's really gross, and honestly, it's really sad that it's having to be Romanian authorities that are going after him. The US and the UK, they knew what he was doing, and they let him get away with it, because obviously he was making money for someone. I know
Yeah.
he is connected to Peter Thiel.
Who is that?
Peter Thiel is this really seedy, shady character, who's kind of like inherently a little bit more aloof. He's a billionaire. And it's interesting that a lot of people don't know him as much. Like a lot of people know, like they know Zuckerberg. They know Musk. They know Bezos. Like they know those billionaires. But Peter Thiel really kind of goes under the radar for a lot of people, and that's not a mistake. He's attached. He was one of the first investors for Facebook, and like outside investors, because he's just like a venture capitalist, and he's just connected to so many different things, and like so many different social medias and like media networks in general. And he really is, he's a misogynist too, and he just is a big part of censorship. And so it's not
Ah, I see.
surprising to me. Yeah, and he's really connected. And he just is a little under the radar, so it works. Like billionaires already have so much power, just because money is power. It just is. In the world we live in.
Yeah, and if not many people know you, that's a huge advantage.
Exactly. Yeah. So for Andrew Tate to be connected to Peter Thiel, it makes sense to me that he was able to get away with being a known human trafficker for so long. Um, yeah, he's got that billionaire on his side. And, like to be a billionaire, just inherently, you're okay with human exploitation. Like you cannot be a billionaire without being okay with that. Um, and yeah. Oh, but we've talked about this longer than I care to. I just kind of want to keep my eyes on this case. But there is one more thing I wanted to say about it, is that there's been some pushback on Greta Thunberg for her saying, like he's small dick energy. Um, so many men are coming out and just like projecting and unloading. Ugh, maybe bad verbiage for that. Yuck. And they're making it this plight of their size insecurity, and how Greta shouldn't have said that, and blah blah
Oh,
blah blah blah.
please, please, no one cares. No
No
one
one
cares.
cares.
I
It's not a
don't
plight.
care. Yeah, no,
Shut up.
no.
Shut up. Like, size insecurity stems from the patriarchy. So literally, if you have a problem with this, you fix it. You
Yeah,
talk to your boys.
yeah.
I have no time for this. Like, she's a 19-year-old who had a like freaking human trafficker come at her, and she told him he had small dick energy. And rather than like the fact that he's human trafficking people and like just fully assaulting them, and it's just absolutely horrible, and he's connected to billionaires, you're talking about your small wieners and crying about it.
What do you expect from
So
men? Literally, this like fragile masculinity. I can't.
I can't. So I just it bothers me so much, because like there's so much to talk about in this case. There's so much to unpack. My heart really goes out for young women who are having to hear so much of this trash, and having to just it's beyond. Because another thing that's coming into this conversation is saying that so many young men flock to men like Andrew Tate because they don't have enough role models. I'm not sure what they mean by men not having enough role models. They've dominated history for forever. Like there's nothing but male role models, and acting like they need someone like Andrew Tate. Anyways, they're saying that young men flock to Andrew Tate because they're not having enough sex. So that's just a dog whistle for ladies. Put out if you don't want to be assaulted and have men hate you, which is BS. Like, so just young women, do not listen to this. Do not internalize this. I know that's hard to do, but like, please just fully reject this. You are not responsible for men being violent and horrible and awful. And like, I'm so sick of this idea that women are responsible for men's like sexual impulses. They're not. No one is stopping these guys from being able to please themselves. Go for it. Have fun. You are not entitled to other people's bodies. And that's my soapbox on that.
Oh, I can't believe he's viewed as some sort of good role model for men. I can't believe men act like they don't have enough role models. Like, literally in every aspect of everything, whether you look at like representation politics, in like media and gaming and everything, like it's always been male role models. And only recently, people are embracing non-men as role models.
Yeah, it's beyond frustrating. And it's bothersome too because I remember hearing the same argument in my early 20s. I'm in my mid 30s now, and I remember hearing this same tired excuse in my early 20s. And part of me believed it. And that's just what scares me is I'm sick of seeing this. I'm sick of this kind of like pattern repeating itself. And so I just really, really want people to know that like you're not responsible for these violent men. Like they're just awful. And I hope Andrew Tate is actually punished for this. I don't know how it's going to go, but I really, really hope he is punished for it. And I hope this starts exposing, the porn industry at large some more and the human trafficking that goes on at large and the billionaires that are connected to it. Should we talk about Harry and Meghan?
Yeah.
Okay, so Prince Harry's book just came out a few days ago, and his Netflix documentary with his wife, Meghan Markle, came out about a month ago. I finished the book just the other day. You haven't read the book. You're probably not going to. You're definitely not going to.
I'm not interested in reading the inner deepest thoughts of a man. So I'm not reading the book, but I did watch the documentary.
Yeah, we both watched the documentary, all 6 parts to it.
Yeah.
And you watched a few of the interviews too, right?
Yeah,
That Harry did.
I watched the 60 minutes one just because it was readily available. I kind of watched it in the background.
Mm-hmm. I watched the 60 Minutes one and I watched the ITV one. I didn't watch the Good Morning America one. Because I just kind of was like, I got the gist. Plus I read I'm like, I got it, because it's kind of like some of the talking points are being repeated now. But where do we want to start? Because a lot of things are kind of covered in both the book and the documentary and the interviews. There's only a few things that are different, but I guess it kind of is all together. Where should we start of tackling just the whole conversation of Harry and Meghan?
I don't know. What stuck to me mostly was I just kept. I couldn't not notice how they were kind of, even though it was like a call out of some sort, but I feel like the things they called out, like an apology is not enough. So I don't understand why they're waiting for an apology. And I don't like that they're still honoring them as a monarchy and as a family. Obviously, it goes without saying, I like that they're calling out the monarchy and the family dynamics and the toxicity of it all. I like that Harry talked about his mother,
Yeah.
Princess Diana. I always, like, that's literally the main reason I was ever interested in watching, is to get some insight on that. And also,
Right.
like, I like how they kind of went through how Meghan got into the family and the process of that and how things unfolded and how, to an extent, she wasn't really fully aware of the racism she was being subjected to. And how, like, at some point it just kind of clicked, and even for Harry.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, definitely myself included, that it's the interest in Diana that remains with any interest with either of her sons, and definitely it's wanting to know Harry's perspective of his mother's death and how he dealt with that. That's what was a huge interest for me, for sure. And I definitely wanted to know more about some of the breakdown of the relationship once Meghan, became part of the family and all of that. Like I definitely wanted to hear the dirt on that. So that's why I, watched everything and read the book as fast as possible because I just wanted all of that. And yeah, I love that Prince Harry and Meghan, even though there's definitely a lot of valid critique with them, like they're Harry, in one of his recent interviews, he says that he still does support the monarchy. So that I really don't like at all. I wish he would just like get on board with like, no, get rid of the monarchy. But I also like
Yeah.
don't. I'm not surprised. I really am not surprised that he's not down with that. But because the thing is that even if he doesn't say that, he's deemed that way. That is like the archetype of him. Like that's
Yeah.
how it's projected that he wants to
Yeah.
tear apart the monarchy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the critique is that like no matter what, he still benefits from his position, even though he's not like fully on paper part of the monarchy anymore. But still, um, I also like felt weird about Meghan kind of romanticizing the family's relationship with Elizabeth. I didn't like that. Um, I don't know. I was just hoping for something that's more scorched earth, but they seem like I don't know the way it was portrayed. I can't tell. I can't remember if this was in the book from what you've told me or from the documentary or the interviews. I think probably one of the interviews. Basically, it seems like they had to leave the monarchy for Meghan's safety and well-being.
Right. Yeah. Like it just everything came to a head and it was like, let's just get out of here because it will be easier for us. Like we can't take living in here.
So, how do things change from here? Is the monarchy going to stop being racist?
Well, I mean, Harry won't even call his family racist.
Oh, yeah. What did he call it?
He said that unconscious bias is different than racism. Uh, and the thing is it isn't. Like unconscious bias is racism. Like racism doesn't have to be intentional to be racist. Like it's still oppressive. It's still harmful. And I was a bit disappointed that that point hasn't landed with him. Um, I know it's hard to swallow the pill of family members being racist, uh, but it's important to understand that and not detach yourself from it. I feel a lot of times white people like will use words like this, like unconscious bias or internalized racism, which internalized racism is not is something that is not something white people can do. Like internalized racism is like the way that a black person can sometimes believe or internalize stereotypes about other black people. The similar to how internalized misogyny is women believing like very sexist things about women. A man can't have internalized misogyny. He's just a misogynist. So it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting how a lot of people have wanted to kind of like take that word, and I think it's a way of trying to remove yourself from it, right? Because it's the
Yeah.
whole point of it being like, well, it's not intentional, but that's just the point. Like it doesn't matter if it's intentional or not. And I find the terminology of unconscious bias to be redundant. um Bias is inherently unconscious. Like we already have this terminology, like we already have the terminology of like bias and prejudice and racism. Like we already have a lot of these nuances. So I don't like this like new creation of nuances that like Harry's kind of trying to do here, of like, in a way, honestly excusing family members just because they don't mean it. Oh, it's just like that's just the problem. Like you can be a vessel for racism whether you mean to or not. That's how insidious it is. That's precisely the power it has. And if you don't understand that, you're going to keep letting yourself be that.
Exactly. It kind of, I think it's meant to soften the blow, but what's the point
Yeah.
if there isn't any growing pains and reconciliation with the reality, then no change is gonna occur. And, even though Harry left the monarchy, he still isn't willing to question the family institution at large, like in general, because what if he can't admit that they are and continue to be racist, then what exactly is the goal you're trying to achieve here? You want an apology, and then what?
Right. And I really liked the Netflix documentary because it got into a lot of, the history of Britain and like how it was completely beyond complicit and like a huge participant of slavery to the Americas. And that persisted long after England itself had abolished slavery. They still were willing to human traffic, people to the
Mm-hmm.
colonies.
Yeah.
It got into like how the monarchy has built their wealth on this. Like it did go there. I was surprised by that. I didn't expect that. And I think I liked the documentary more because the people who spoke about all of this history, like they're educated on this. This is their job. They are like educators on under on explaining all of this. Harry is not, and I think that really showed in the interviews. And it definitely, he definitely sounded like he was speaking to white people. Um, and on one hand, I understand that you like have to. Frankly, white people are so infantilized that like you have to handhold through a lot of these conversations. But to what extent? And then at what cost? Like, I don't really think it was that helpful what Harry was saying, because a lot of the people who don't agree with him or don't get it, I don't think that he did anything there that was going to help connect. Um, and yeah, like, what's the point? Like you said, what is the point? Like, and I don't know. I I feel and I have hope that Harry's going to continue learning. He's shown that he has a lot of willingness to learn. He is the only royal who has gone on the record with speaking about things like this. I don't want to give him too much credit, but it is something to still be, because it's breadcrumbs, right? Like it's like, oh wow, bare human decency, great job, Harry. But that's where we're at with the royals, and so I do like I do like and support a lot of what Harry and Meghan are doing. I like the disruption, but definitely it's not going far enough. Um, and I think he still thinks that there's a chance of reconciliation. And I mean, he knows his family better than I do, but I'm just someone who's been a royal watcher for a lot of years. Like I'm totally guilty of that. And I just do not see them being willing to take Harry back, especially after everything that has been said.
Yeah, and what's in it for them? He's causing too much of a disruption, which is also the one thing I've been enjoying, even though it's not enough. It's still there, and it's nice seeing
Mm-hmm.
William annoyed as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
I'm
that's,
loving how much the British press is just like so upset too.
yeah, exactly. They deserve to be this upset, honestly. Um, I just, I don't know. I feel like Harry doesn't even, I don't think he is just open to reconciliation with the family. I think he wants that. And that's part of the problem of him not being able to dismantle the family institution, like his own institution, aside from the monarchy. Um, it's just, I don't know. I know it's difficult, but sometimes you kind of just have to accept that your family is trash and that you're going to have to make do without them, basically. And that's something we've talked about with Britney, obviously, and her family.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like she is kind of done with them. And I think sometimes you just have to get to that place. And it doesn't seem like Harry is willing to let go of that. Because honestly, it would benefit him. Having the association would benefit him in different ways, social capital as a start. Um, but yeah, I don't think they're gonna welcome him back.
No, I don't think they're going to welcome him back. I don't think you can come back from like they now King Charles. Ugh, I can't. But Charles, cut off Harry. Like he doesn't pay for his security anymore. He pays for Prince Andrew's security. Don't worry, that guy's protected. I don't know if the people around him are protected, but that's a separate conversation. Uh, they're willing to pay for him, but they won't pay for security for Harry and Meghan and the two children. I how do you how could you even forgive someone who put your safety at so much risk, and not just your own but your wife and your children's? Like I personally wouldn't be open to reconciliation at that point. Like things got so bad. It I don't know how. And yeah, like why would you even want to go back to this? It's kind of like, haven't you learned anything really? And like I don't know. I mean, like it's, what do I know about the family? It's just I don't see this family as a real family. It seems like a Truman show of it's like a Truman show of white supremacy, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in my country, multi-generational households are very common, and obviously sometimes fights happen. Um, but normally you don't see the family, or let's say like the provider of the family, cut things off from other family members, like essentials. They may not speak for a while, but they're not going to make their life difficult, and they're certainly not going to put their safety at risk like that.
Right.
So, I'm kind of taken aback that Harry is not, he doesn't realize that's exactly what they did, you know? They compromised his safety.
Well, he does realize that, and he's even flat out said that. I think part of this is he's wanting to be open to forgiveness, which a lot of people find is like an admirable trait. I'm a little less, I romanticize forgiveness a little less. I think
Yeah,
what happened
same.
is, yeah, I think it's horrible what happened. And I don't even think it's about like, oh, I forgive you? Harry could forgive them and still have nothing to do with them for the rest of his life. And I don't know. It's horrible. Like they really, honestly, things could have it could have been worst case scenario in this situation. It truly could. That's not an exaggeration in the slightest. The threats were very real. They were sent things all the time. The paparazzi knew where they were. They seriously had to flee and run to Tyler Perry's house to like hide out.
Yeah.
And thank goodness that was an option. But yeah, there's really no coming back from that. Like the family made it really clear how much they care about you and your family's safety. And yeah, it's unbelievable. I like that you pointed out like that you're used to like multi-generational homes, and that fighting happens and whatnot. Um, yeah, because I think this is a case of it's beyond that, and the whole money attachment is something that was so interesting to me and something I hadn't really ever thought of that, because you just always think of royalty as being so rich and like, oh, they have everything. Um, but Harry makes it really clear that like all of his money was directly attached to his father, and that his father, like he had control over it, and that money is used over you. um that's not a relationship or a dynamic I've had with my parents since it's been years, since I was very young. So that was just like so surreal to me to think about. And that what does that do of just even having that power dynamic of you already have like a child and parent, and even though the child's an adult, but like the parent's still paying for them and it's expected to pay for them. Like it's not weird that um, Charles pays for Harry. That's literally what's expected of Charles. But all that inclines because I just remember it seems that when families do control purse strings, that this natural control goes along with it. And that's something that was a little different that was spoke about in the book more than the documentary. Is kind of, it seems like the family didn't take Harry so seriously, and it was just kind of thought that he would just be around forever and they would just have him just kind of do whatever was needed as he was needed, and kind of an afterthought. Like he says plainly, like it seemed like they didn't think he'd even get married ever.
Why? Why did they belittle him so much?
I don't know. I think it's just because, in the book he talks about how he wasn't really academically inclined, and he kind of had this reputation of being the naughty one. And
Oh, okay.
that frankly, like Camilla helped reinforce that narrative with her relationship with the press. He flat out accuses Camilla of the spin doctor that was hired to help like rehabilitate Charles and Camilla's relationship, like like how the press framed it and the public's relationship with them. They hired this quote unquote spin doctor to help fix the rep. And part of that was throwing Harry under the bus, and sometimes William too, but mostly Harry, because it was like, oh, let's have this troubled child. Charles will look good, like being the like single dad and like saving the day. um
Right.
Harry makes it clear that yeah, like Camilla was a huge part of that. And so, and in just he there's this whole idea of like, the book's even called Spare, because it's the play on the like there's the heir and then the spare. Like if something happens to the heir, oh, we have the spare. And it's just like always clear like that he's the afterthought. He even says that like spares are there in case something happens to William. They can, if William needs a blood transfusion, they can use Harry. Or like he's supposed to be like there as like the replacement or the like the help for the first and foremost. And I think this happens in some families. This is a natural dynamic between like, especially if there's just two children and they're close in age between youngest and oldest. um it seemed like there's that natural dynamic, but then it's just heightened with it being in the monarchy. And yeah, and honestly, I think that is a big problem with all of this because I think when Meghan came into the picture, she didn't view him that way. And I think she instilled a lot of confidence in him. Confidence that had been attacked by his family, quite frankly, by like having this dynamic this whole time. Um, and I think, honestly, it seems that the biggest problem that the family had with Harry and Meghan is that they stood up for themselves. Meghan she didn't like seeing some of how Harry was treated and just gave him some confidence. And that was a problem for the family. That's kind of what I gathered a lot from the book and the documentary, and not only standing up for themselves, the fact that they were getting more attention than other members of the family, which is something I didn't realize was such a problem still. Like I had heard that with Charles and Diana in the past. I didn't know that was still such a thing, which I feel foolish that I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, they view her as someone who's inserted herself into all of this and ruined it for them. They liked it better when Harry was quiet.
Well, even beyond not just with Meghan, like, Harry brings up in the book that like they one time like Kate was supposed to go to some like tennis event and Charles's team like sent a message to her team saying the Duchess better not hold a racket because if there was a picture taken of Kate holding a tennis racket, they knew that she would be on the front page the next day and not Charles because he had an event that same day. So there's this goes every which way with the family. Um and yeah, so like of course like when Meghan came in, they saw it really as like a usurper because it's like, oh my gosh, like if they don't even want Kate making headlines and she's William, the heir's wife, they certainly don't want Meghan stealing the limelight when she's the Spare's wife.
The Spare's wife was black.
Right. Um, yeah. So all that being said, do you want me to read you a few parts of the book that I found particularly funny?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so I preferred the Netflix documentary. And it's not I don't even know if I would recommend the book. If you like reading and you're interested in the royals, then yes, I recommend the book. If you're not interested in reading, there is the audiobook which Harry reads himself and a lot of people are really enjoying. But otherwise if you're not interested, like yeah, I don't really recommend it. But I do recommend the Netflix documentary. I think it's good. Because the Netflix documentary I felt was more cohesive. I felt it was more like this is our love story and this is why we left. It had a clear message, whereas the book is a little more all over the place. If there were one way to put it and kind of wrap it up, I guess it would be like one of my friends had mentioned that it's like a PTSD memoir. And I think that's a good way to put it because he does get into, the PTSD of losing his mother and then being in the army and then really just having the paparazzi, go after his wife this hard. It's just, I think that's a good framing of it. And maybe the book's a little all over the place because that's just the nature of trauma. I don't know if enough time has passed for there to be more reflection or full reflection. Maybe there's no such thing as full reflection. I don't know. So there's definitely parts of the book that are good, but there's some parts that are really silly. So that being said, let's get to some of the silly parts. After the wedding, William and Kate invited Meghan and Harry over for tea to kind of like clear the air. And they walk in and they kind of have some small talk, and then Meghan gets into it really fast of like, hey, like I know things always haven't been like great with us, or I know there's been maybe some tension started at the very beginning. Meghan brings up that Kate had given Meghan some fashion contacts, and Meghan basically was like, oh no, it's fine, I have my own fashion contacts, and she thought that Kate had been hurt by that. I don't know, but basically like, and then there was a whole thing with the bridesmaid dresses situation. But William and Kate like got like just started getting into other things then. Like they started saying like that Harry and Meghan hadn't given them Easter presents, and Harry was like, we have never done Easter presents, that's just not even a thing. And then they were talking about place cards at the wedding. There was just this whole thing But the part of the back and forth that I found interesting, that Harry actually has like kind of written out as a back and forth dialogue, is Kate confronting Meghan about Meghan saying something about Kate having baby brain, which is just kind of like a symptom of like when you're pregnant or like after a pregnancy, you're just kind of hormonal and you can be forgetful. It's just like a thing that can happen. Apparently, Kate really didn't like that. And I think this speaks to the overall cultural differences of like Kate being British and also like married to the heir, and then Meghan being American and completely not understanding any of these customs, which frankly, I think Harry should have prepared Meghan a lot more for so much of these dynamics. He could have like
Yeah.
saved her a lot of awkwardness. But anyways, I just kind of wanted to read back and forth because it's reads like a soap opera to me, kind of. So Harry says that Kate was like looking out in the garden. She was gripping her chair so tightly that her fingers were white. And she said that she was owed an apology. And Meghan says, "For what?" She goes, "You hurt my feelings, Meghan." "When? Please tell me." "I told you I couldn't remember something and you said it was my hormones." "What are you talking about?" Kate mentioned a phone call, which they discussed the timing of the wedding rehearsals. And Meghan goes, "Oh, yes, I remember. You couldn't remember something. And I said, it's not a big deal. It's baby brain because you had just had a baby. It's hormones." And then Kate's eyes widen. "Yes, you talked about my hormones. We're not close enough for you to talk about my hormones." And Megan's eyes got wide too, and she looked confused. And she goes, "I'm sorry. I talked about your hormones. That's just how I talk about with my girlfriends." William pointed at Meg. "It's rude, Meghan. It's not what's done here in Britain." And Meghan says to William, "Kindly take your finger out of my face." Um, which I love. Like, it's such an example of like she just really doesn't care about this dynamic of him being the heir. She's just like, "Don't put your finger in my face," which I don't think many William people have said to William. Um,
Oh my God, they hate her. They
they
hate
hate
her.
her. They really do. Like, can you imagine that the future king having someone be like, "Kindly take your finger out of my face"? Like, he's never heard that. He really hasn't.
I
And so,
love
as
it.
cringe as Harry and Meghan can be, I love this just natural disruption. And I think this speaks a lot to the fact that Meghan is older. She married Harry when she was 36. I think she's the oldest royal bride there's been. And even though Kate married William when she was 30, she was attached to William since her early 20s. And there was like a lot of years of her getting used to things. Some might say groomed by things. Whereas like Meghan came into the picture in her mid 30s. She was a fully developed adult. She had her own everything. And I think that's a huge problem. Like, and that's a huge problem that they don't want to admit that they have a problem with the fact that there was a woman who was already established and extremely confident. What do you think though about the idea of not being able to talk about someone's hormones? Because some part of me understands and agrees, but I also find it so funny and just find it to be just such a British thing of like, because I'm American but I lived in Europe for almost 5 years, and I really struggled in the beginning, culturally, of just like not being so American. And something I learned is that we do tend to just blurt things out that we do not realize are rude, at all. Like I can easily see someone saying like, "Oh, baby brain," and not realizing like, "Hey, maybe don't comment on my body," like, really like commenting on someone's hormones is commenting on their body.
Yeah.
Especially after they've just had a baby, like things are a little raw and vulnerable. And I think that's just the crux of it, that like, Kate's like, "We're not close enough for you to talk about my hormones." But like, as silly as it sounds, like they weren't. And I think that's something that Meghan never quite understood, that like she was wanting this closeness, but it's like, it's just not there. And there are people who have been in the royal family for decades who don't have closeness with anyone. And I think that was a rude awakening for Meghan. Like, she really thought she was marrying a family. I don't know how she was so clueless, but she I believe it when she thought that.
Yeah. I mean, I think if it's like woman to woman, I think that's their business and they establish these boundaries according to what they feel is right, but like I definitely don't think men should talk about it.
No. Like reading this, it gave me it reminded me of like Real Housewives when a husband gets involved in
Mm-hmm.
a fight between the women. It just never goes well. And I was a bit surprised that it was mentioned in the book. I felt that Harry kind of made a few more digs at Kate, almost than more than William. And it's not that I think Kate is an innocent or like a great person. I just feel like more the focus should be on the royal family members who are like, the active like members, like who are born into it, the men too. You know, like William is the royal here. Charles is the royal here. Although I do think Camilla should be dragged forever. Like she's just absolutely awful. She was doing horrible things to Harry since he was a child. So it's a different story. I just feel like there was so much tension between Meghan and Kate. I think a lot of it, like, you know, a lot of people say that she's KK Kate, and I wouldn't
Oh
doubt
my
that.
God.
Yeah, like it's been trending for months. Oh my gosh. I wouldn't doubt that, but I just also think that we don't really know of many like outwardly we don't really know anything that Kate has done, and at the end of the day, like she doesn't have a lot of power in this situation. You know, if Kate ever even left the royal family, she wouldn't even have guardianship over her custody over her children. Like I'm sure she could still see them, but as far her children belong to the crown, especially her oldest, and they're quite little, so it's a weird position to be in. But I do think Kate, that's all. That being said, I think Kate loves being married to the heir. I think she loves the monarchy. I think she loves all this. And that's why she took it so seriously and was so upset that Meghan didn't take it as seriously. And I think Meghan took it seriously, but it doesn't live and breathe for it. And she also wasn't raised in it. Yeah, it's too much. But, well, here's another example of an interaction between the women since Harry gave so many. Um, and this one, I have to say, I'm on Kate's side, and I want to see if you agree. I think you're gonna.
Okay, tell me.
Okay. So I guess like they were about to do some the Royal Foundation Forum. They were about to be filmed for something. And so before they were filmed for it, like going on stage for it all, Meghan asked Kate to borrow some lip gloss. And because Meghan forgot hers. And she just, you know, she wanted some because they were about to, you know, be on camera and be there in front of everyone. I guess Kate was like really like was kind of like taken aback at
Yeah, that's
that
gross. Yeah.
request.
That's gross.
Yeah, okay,
It's
yeah.
gross. I would never use someone else's lip gloss. Are you joking?
Okay,
No.
I knew you couldn't hold back on that. Yeah, no,
No.
exactly. Like, well, I'll just finish at this then. Like, so I
Okay.
guess like Kate was like taken aback, and but she like went to her handbag, and like, Harry says she reluctantly pulled out a small tube. Meg squeezed some onto her finger and applied it to her lips. Kate grimaced. Small clash of styles, maybe. That's what Harry said. And I'm just like, look, I do not appreciate that Kate is made to seem uptight here by the fact that she doesn't want to share a lip product with someone.
She's hygienic. She's not uptight here.
Exactly. And this is something that annoys me with a lot of women relationships. I don't like that it's expected that you're not that to not have as many boundaries. Like, oh, if another woman wants to borrow like your lip gloss or your mascara, and like these are things that literally you can contract things from. It's not hygienic to share this stuff at all. You're not supposed to. I don't like that it's expected that you're supposed to, and if you like don't want to, you're like a mean girl, or you're uptight, or you're prissy or whatever. I don't like that. It's similar to also like the idea that quite often when women are first introduced to each other, they're expected to hug, whereas like
Yeah.
men get to just shake each other's hands, but women are expected to hug. Um, and I guess like that was something that was kind of a problem too, is that Meghan was going around hugging people, and like Brits just don't really hug, especially in the monarchy, and that like kind of took people aback quite often. I'm not a hugger. I don't really like being hugged, and I don't like that that gets put on as if I'm like a cold person, or like I don't like people. It's just not a thing for me. It's a sensory thing. It's just not something I engage in. And I don't like this idea that if you don't do these things, that it means that you're just like kind of like more of a mean person. Um,
I think that's just in America, right?
I think it's emphasized there, but it still happens even in Europe too, because like a
Really?
lot of time, yeah, because you have to do the kiss cheek. Girls may not hug. Like in
Mm.
America, they more hug, um, depending on where you are, because America's such a big country. Because on the East Coast, I know they do the kiss cheek quite often too. But
Mm-hmm.
like in Europe, it was expected to do the kiss cheek with girls when you first like introduced each other, whereas in America, I did more hug. But it still was this like more of a physical intimacy, um more of a like closeness than the men when they first greeted each other. The guys
Right.
didn't do that. I just don't like that. Like I'm sick of that, and I don't like, I always know if I don't want to do it that it's going to be seen as I'm uptight, or don't or I'm snobby, or I don't like this person or whatever, when it's just like, look, like no, I don't even, like my family members ask before they can hug me, you know? So um I didn't like that, the kind of the undertows of that. But I get it also because there was plenty of other things that this family did that made it clear that they weren't welcome. So yeah.
For me, it has to be like long time passing of me not seeing someone in order for me to be open to hugging them.
Yeah, I'm just not into hugging. And I guess,
Yeah.
Megan says she's a hugger. So that's how she shows love. Like, but it just wasn't a thing. And I think that it really didn't go over well because, like, yeah, it definitely is more of an American thing to be such a hugger and like all up in people's faces like that. I think it was so Harry goes on to, he explains in the book that the first time she met William that she just went for a hug with him because Harry didn't warn her. And Harry, he's flat out said, he's like, it
She
freaked
hugged
William out.
William?
She hugged William
Oh my god.
the first time she met
Seriously?
him. That's how much she didn't know. She really didn't know. Like, girl, what, I can't. But yeah, she hugged him. Other parts of the book that I didn't like is he talks about the army a lot, which I get that like part of that was like the PTSD and also to show how the army like helped give him structure and all of that and whatnot. But he talked about it way too long. It was so boring to me. Um, and then another part he talked about that I didn't like is he talked about his wiener.
I seriously have no time for any man talking about their penis in any way or any context.
No, like it wasn't even a casual mention. It wasn't like, so he said that he went to Antarctica and that's how he ended up getting a frostbite on his penis. Um and he said that he like was still injured when he was at William and Kate's wedding because he had gone on the expedition just prior to that. Which, so part of me wonders if he's telling us this so that every time we see photos of William and Kate's wedding, we think of his frostbitten wiener. Because, like, I know that's what I'm going to think of going forward. So maybe it's revenge. But he had talked about it entirely too long. It wasn't like a throwaway comment of like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that you could get frostbite so bad, even in other extremities, blah, blah, blah. No, he like seriously mentioned it like 3 different times. And it's like this ongoing saga of fixing his mangled junk. And it just
Oh
was like, what are we doing here,
god.
Harry? Like,
Yeah. I heard some parts of it from the audiobook. Like there were clips circulating. And I don't know, I just kind of want to like download the PDF of the book and count how many times he said my penis.
too many times. And oh my, yeah, you sent me the one clip and asked me if it was true. And I said, yeah, yeah, it's true. The part where he's trying to like fix himself up, and somebody told him that if he puts Elizabeth Arden cream on, that it will help make it better. And apparently, that's the type of face cream that his mother used to use.
Ooh, they set him
So,
up. They set him up with that. Come on. You don't put a cream that has fragrance in it on your frosted penis. You don't do that. You need to go to the
frosted
pharmacy.
penis. But yeah, that's actually a great health tip right there. Do not put
Yeah.
fragrance lotion on your junk. Like, my
Yeah.
goodness.
Get some CeraVe, get some petroleum jelly. I don't know. Something
Yeah.
clinical. Not
Go to a
Elizabeth
doctor?
Arden.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, go to a doctor. Now,
Go to
Elizabeth
a
Arden, the same, out of all their entire collection, they suggested his mom's face cream.
his mom's face cream. So he
Oh
said
my
that while he's using the when he opened it, he got reminded it of his mom while putting this
God.
lotion on. And I just am like, you know what, Harry? You really do need to remember that you're part of the royal family and acknowledge more of the history, not only the racism, maybe some of the incense, because like you cannot like you're inviting all kinds of Oedipus jokes, dude. Come on. Like
Yeah, he
this
made
is
it
the
so
where
easy.
he really did. And like as someone who's defended him, it's just like help us out a little bit. Help us out. Like this does not help us out, Harry. So that was an awkward part for sure. But he went on a lot about it. I did not want to hear about it. I don't know what the point was. Must have, it's a PTSD memoir. It must have traumatized him. But like honestly, like as a woman, I don't want to hear about the trauma of male genitals. Something I found surprising in the book that I didn't know, and it's something that I've dragged William and Kate for, is that that they have a reputation of not working a lot because like every year, like the royal circuit, like this list of like how many hours the royals have logged in of different events and stuff comes out. And William and Kate have had such low numbers for so long, and so they've gotten this reputation of being really lazy and work shy and whatnot. Um, and I really thought that, but in the book, Harry explains that you actually don't have control fully of how much work you're allowed to do. That Charles actually decides how much work that William and Kate are allowed to do. And since we know Charles and Camilla are so jealous and like have such like literally jealous of Charles's own sons, and they don't want anyone to steal the spotlight, they intentionally don't have William and Kate work very often. I had no idea about that.
Me neither. I'm finding out right now.
Harry also said that a lot of like some of the events are like self-reported, and that him and William tend to not report a lot of it. So like they do a lot of visiting with veterans, like just they'll go and just like visit with like a wounded veteran or someone like for a mental health visit or whatnot, and they never report any of those things. But he's saying like, we could like go and do all these visits with veterans and not tell anyone, but then someone goes and cuts a ribbon for like a horse barn and that gets marked down, and so that I hadn't thought about, and I was totally guilty of like believing fully, but just like everything, like he's pointing out that like so much of this is a facade, so much there's always layers and stories about this, and this is always like to make the heir or the monarch look the best, always, just always. And so yeah.
How much control does the monarchy have over the media? And is it control, or is it like connections that they form with them that they have to cultivate?
It seems like it's connections that they have to cultivate, and it's a kind of a precarious balancing act. Harry describes it as a symbiotic relationship, that they both need each other and they both feed on each other, and that's part of the problem. That the monarchy can't remove itself from the press because it needs the press to keep itself relevant. It also needs the press to give the narratives that they want out there, because the palace has this motto of never complain, never explain. But Harry's like, there's tons of complaining. They just do it through the media outlets, so it seems like someone else is saying it.
Yeah, so their complaints manifest differently and more indirectly.
Right. And they can say like, I had nothing to do with this. It was a source or whatever. It's them saying it. But Harry says there's so many stories of intimate details that he had with his family that literally no one else could leak it but his family. And so that's part of the problem, is that his family was leaking stories about him. And a lot of the thing is they were leaking stories to distract from their own scandals. We all know about the Prince Andrew and what he did, and how the family, had to pay $12 million of taxpayer money to his underage victim, or was underage at the time. um they've completely like they definitely threw so many stories about Meghan to just try to cover up during all of that. Another big thing that was happening when Meghan first joined the family is that, it's pretty much, from what I hear, and this is alleged, but whatever, it's said that it's an open secret that William has been messing around on Kate forever. Like, he has not been loyal in that
Yeah.
relationship. And that the press was kind of threatening him that they were going to expose that more. And stories were traded about Meghan instead, so like, does the monarchy control the press, or does the press control the monarchy? It seems like it kind of goes both ways, because then you've got reporters on record saying, like, we knew this about William and we're not allowed to say anything. Or, there was that famously, like, one of the news anchors was caught when she didn't know she was on mic, of talking about how they knew everything about Prince Andrew and being connected to Epstein, and all of that. They knew it 3 years before it came out, but when the palace found out that they knew about it, the palace threatened them with everything. Like, they were like, we'll never let you have access to William and Kate ever again. We're not going to let you film any of this or that, or da da da, and like, these are major events that they want access to. They want to have the access to the interviews with William and Kate. They want to be able to be there for the coronation. They want, all of these things. So it kind of, it's this back and forth. And Harry just seems like he's done with it. He says, I'm not doing this. I'm not selling the stories. If you want to hear, the whole point of all of this is, if you want to hear something and how I feel, you're going to hear it directly from me. You're not going to hear it from any kind of source or any other media outlet. It's going to come directly from me. So while so much of his story is quite cringe, there are parts that are really good, and I do think part of the huge reason why is being attacked so much is because he's not just going after his family. He's going after the press too, and he's completely exposing the connections that they make. And this obviously goes beyond the UK. This works in the United States too, with celebrities and their PR agents, and selling stories for this, or like, oh well, we'll give you this or that. This is a larger problem than just in the UK. Even though the UK media seems to be just completely out of control.
Yeah, I mean, the monarchy, they're just glorified celebrities, honestly, because like in real monarchies that exist even today, they fully control the media. It's not a symbiotic relationship. They don't have to do anything for them to cultivate a good relationship. It's not a give and take relationship. They fully control them. So it's interesting seeing how differently it works in the UK, where the royals can't really feel safe with the media. They have to engage in they have like a transactional relationship,
Mm-hmm. It seems like a delicate little dance that they play, yeah, and it's definitely transactional, 100%. Um, yeah, it was gross. There's a lot of focus of that in the book, and how much William played a huge part in that, and Charles and Camilla. It's awful. And that this is so normalized, that this is just seen as part of the deal, that they really truly do expect Harry to put up with this. They really thought that he was supposed to put up with this, and I think Harry put up with it for a lot of years, but when it started happening to Meghan, that's where he really drew the line. Was like, no, like, just no, we're not doing this. And just like any abuser, when you start standing up for yourself and taking back some of your own power or drawing boundaries, of course they retaliated and got super angry with him. There's a story in the book that I found so weird that I think is just a larger statement on the dynamic between the brothers. So before Harry got married to Meghan, he had to ask the Queen if he could keep his beard for his wedding, because he was going to be married in his military uniform, and apparently you're not supposed to have a facial hair in a military uniform. So he had to get permission to have a beard at the wedding. And it was really important to him to have the beard because it's like part of his identity and his shield or whatever. And also, that I shouldn't say whatever, that's how he feels. It's important to him. And also he was saying that Meghan wouldn't recognize him without the beard because he'd had a beard the whole relationship. And the Queen okayed it because I just think she knew she was only going to live much longer, and like, who cares? Like, whatever. Like, he's also not the heir Like that's part of the luxury of not being the heir, is sometimes some of these rules aren't as strict on you. And so apparently, though, when William found out that the Queen had okayed for Harry to keep the beard, William got so mad. He like flipped out and like demanded that Harry shave his beard because he's like, I had to shave my beard for my wedding, so you have to. And Harry was just like, well, no, I'm not going to. And
What is
William was
this?
even,
They're like children.
it's so weird, right? Like,
I can't.
I do not have this dynamic with my siblings at all. Like William like flat out said like as the heir and you being the spare, I demand you like shave your beard, and he fully pulled that.
I feel like if I was in Megan's shoes, I wouldn't be angry or upset as much as I'd just be like completely humored. I would just like watch this and cackle. Like, this is sheer entertainment. I love it.
It's bizarre, but you know, you'd think that you would laugh, but it's not funny when it's actually happening because like obviously I've not been in a situation of being with a royal, but I was in a relationship where there was a dynamic of an older brother that was just a few years older than the guy I was dating. And it was just the two of them, and there was very much this older brother younger brother dynamic, and I really noticed how much that carried into, like, this persisted from childhood into adulthood, and it really took a toll on um his confidence. And so that's where it's not funny when you see how like this constant acting as if someone's above you really does get into the head of your partner, and how that's just not healthy and it's not okay. And it's really just like another form of abuse because it's flexing that power dynamic and constantly like reinforcing it and like putting the other person down. So I think like honestly Meghan really had a big problem with that. Because the book ends super cheesy with Meghan saying that, like, you know, how much of a man Harry is. He's a man, he's not a spare.
I can't with that language.
It's
I can't.
it's a lot. It's a lot. They have a very heteronormative relationship. Good for them. But they definitely play on those dynamics. But it just kind of speaks to how much Harry needs to hear things like this because his family has done a number on him. I guess I didn't really realize that. I didn't realize how much his family has really kind of just like hurt him even before Meghan, and underestimated him and what that does of a lifetime of, you know, of feeling that way from your family. And a lot of us can relate to that, honestly.
I don't know, that just there's something odd about the cis mindset. Like, why does he need to hear that he's a man to feel valuable? I just, why is their romance so gendered? Why is it so reliant on gendering and acknowledging your position as man versus woman? Like, it's, I don't know, it's kind of sick.
Well, we don't have an we've already talked so long. We don't start open that can of worms of how sick cis het relationships are and like how just like inherently dysfunctional that we don't have time. Like, no. Something that I was surprised by was how Harry had mentioned in the interviews that he has questions surrounding his mother's death. That and in the book he says that he didn't believe that she was dead for a long time. He thought that, you know, she had just like faked her death and like ran away somewhere and was going to come back someday. And it wasn't until his early
Yeah.
20s that it, yeah, like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
until
He
his,
mentioned that in the interview that I watched. So yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an ongoing theme in the book of that. Basically it wasn't until his early 20s that he really fully accepted that his mother had died, which was, I found, just heartbreaking. And it makes sense, right? Like why he would cling on to that hope, because it isn't completely unrealistic, you know, of like thinking she would just go away. But then he was like, he always came back to, he's like, but she wouldn't do this to me. She wouldn't make me like feel this sad. And, you know, it was, that was really hard. And I did not realize that. I mean, in retrospect, it should be obvious, but the royal family didn't get him any therapy, any support, anything like that. And it's so interesting that they didn't. I mean, it makes sense culturally. That's just like not really what British people do. Uh, but I remember watching Princess Diana's funeral, and so many of the women, the older women around. I was a child when it happened, and so many of the older women around just being so upset that both William and Harry were having to walk behind the coffin and thinking it just so gruesome and just terrible, ghoulish, you know. And that the only like consolation is they were like, well, they have all the money in the world, they'll make sure to get them the best doctors, the best therapists ever. And none of that happened. And apparently walking behind the coffin, that was a huge part of the spin doctor too, to garner sympathy for Charles as like a supportive father, because without William and Harry being behind the coffin, it would have just looked like Charles and, you know, it would look like Charles and like people found him complicit in her death. So like the royal family literally were not above using William and Harry as children, even in their own mother's death. And he's still willing to mess with them. But I will say that he does recognize like how abusive this is, and he was not going to repeat that cycle with his children. And I think that's great. I really applaud Harry and Meghan for getting away, even though they're like leaving the door open for the family. I don't like that. But I don't think the door. They think the door is open, but I think the royal family is not open to it. It just makes me happy that they got out. You know, like it's nice to know that one of Diana's sons got out of it, because that's actually how her legacy lives on. If both of her boys stayed tied into that monarchy, you know, Diana's legacy would have died with that.
Yeah.
I just love that one of them got out, and that, you know, their children aren't going to be raised in this
Yeah.
type of lifestyle.
Yeah, no, definitely. The way this whole thing was handled by Harry and Meghan was a direct influence of Diana, I feel. It really, truly is her legacy. I think that's a really good thing.
Totally.
It just seems like there wasn't a sense of finality in the way they were talking about the monarchy and the family. They really are expecting some sort of reconciliation, which I don't see happening from the royals' part. It's just not going to happen. And there's these demands of like an apology and acknowledgement. I don't think they're going to get that
Hmm.
ever. That's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. No, I really, I believe it when the royals feel that they did nothing wrong, because this is a group of super entitled people who live in the a bubble within a bubble, and they also don't want to admit or see the things that they've done, and they also don't want to address that so many of these things are inherently abusive. Like the monarchy, it's like, I mean, they call themselves a king and a prince. They're never going to apologize for the things they're done. These people are beyond.
Yeah, and
And
most of the
even
people who glorify them and worship them wouldn't like it if they acknowledged it and apologized.
no,
Yeah.
they wouldn't. No, and I don't think that they wouldn't like it if Harry and Meghan came back either. It's just not going to happen. And I think this fantasy of it being a happy family, it's not going to happen. I don't know. I guess I don't fault Harry and Meghan for thinking that. Maybe that's just what you tell yourself, and you just want to know, like, well, we've left the door open. We're not cutting off ties. Um, but it does kind of it leaves people a little confused, I feel, and it does give a bit of impression of cakeism, you know, wanting your cake and eating it too. And it's just, you know, that's something that everyone in the monarchy has been accused of, and honestly everyone's guilty of it, including Harry and Meghan to some extent. But ultimately, I'm super glad that they told their story. I totally support them telling their story. It really only benefits abusers and systems of oppression to stay silent. And it's so good that like we're going to always have this record of Harry's perspective and Meghan's perspective, the same way that we have Diana's perspective on record, even though like a lot of the interviews and ways that we got Diana's perspective was done through really seedy, like dishonest means. As Harry pointed out, like it doesn't change that that's still Diana's truth. And the British royal family has gone out of its way to make sure that those interviews with Diana like are never seen again. Like they're not going to let them be aired on like the BBC or different channels ever again. That was recently decided. And William supported that. And he was even saying things like, yeah, Diana was like his mom was paranoid and whatnot. And like just can you imagine saying that about your deceased mother?
I'm literally disgusted by William for saying that. It's so unfair, especially that, like, she had intel. She knew they were going after her. It wasn't like, you know, something she imagined. Um,
Mm-mm.
I just hate that it's dismissed as paranoia. Um,
Completely. And I think for a lot of people, if they had any doubt about the royal family's involvement with the press sensationalism of Diana and like the going after her, I think honestly Harry and Meghan's story kind of proves that yeah, they the royal family is a part of that. Like they were, because Harry even points out, he's like, once my mom left the family, all hell broke loose because she just didn't have the protection anymore. And literally, the story got repeated with Meghan and Harry. And we're even seeing now that people are calling Harry delusional. They're saying that his PTSD has made him, he doesn't know what he's doing and all that. It's just awful. Like the pathologization of Harry has been horrible. And it's been interesting to see because I'm not used to seeing it happen to a man, especially a white man. I'm used to mostly seeing it happen to women.
yeah, yeah, that's true. But I guess he's breaking too many white codes, so he's not absolved from the ableist narrative anymore.
For sure. Like if you go against the powers that be, even if you have privilege, you're gonna not be as protected. Like they're gonna start going after you. Because yeah, they can't have that. So that's been an interesting thing of going after his mental health. And it's just extra gross because like William and Harry were supposed they did so many foundations together for mental health. But yet it seems that whenever Harry brought up a lot of his mental health struggles, such as like panic attacks and such, that his family weren't supportive at all, and that William actually would like laugh at him. So William's a phony, no surprises there. Family's trash. I think Harry should slam the door that he has open on them and just like completely go scorched earth and like live his life with his family and like join the winning team, baby. Like come on, drop this monarchy, drop this BS, like get with the revolution.
Yeah, they're already winning, so there's no need to have these attachments. I hope him and Meghan both just like heal from this, and
Hmm.
maybe revisit this whole conversation later in the future. Because right now it just feels like we're being oversaturated with content because it's one thing
Totally.
after the other. There's not enough time that's passing. I would like to see how they feel in 5 to 10 years, maybe after a long time has passed and after a lot of reflection.
Hmm. And I think more time being parents too, because I know at least
Yeah,
in the book Harry references a lot how much parenthood has helped him, give him different perspectives and been such a teacher for him. So yeah, I think they will continue learning. I hope they do. I also do hope they detach a little bit from this concept of being social justice symbols, because they're not. Uh,
they're not. They're really not.
they're not. They're just not. They definitely, they definitely had like systemic oppression after them. They had huge institutions of power after them. And these are larger issues of social justice, and it's not that it's unrelated. It's just that themselves, they're just not social justice symbols, and also I don't think they're qualified to even talk about it. That's kind of been some of the problem with this, is they're just not really qualified for this. But I think they're trying to balance of like just telling their story while also having to address these larger issues, because it's impossible to tell their story without getting into the heavier everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, it will be interesting to see how they continue to grow from that, and be open to the critique, and hopefully learn from it.
Yeah.